your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for our week in review. The snow Alberta received this week has been the first snowfall for quite a while, particularly in southwestern Alberta. For the most part, it's been quite dry and many of the province's reservoirs have been drying up. The Alberta government says more help is on its way to the agriculture community. Officials say $933 million is being invested to expand and modernize irrigation in the province. That would be good news for farmers, ranchers, and food processors. The province's Agriculture Minister R.J. Sigurdsson says government officials are working with our ag sectors and are monitoring the drought situation to ensure that farmers and ranchers are in the best position heading into this new year. Well, Alberta's opposition party says the Red Deer Regional Hospital's emergency room is overrun. NDP are demanding a definitive timeline to build an expansion to the hospital after it was revealed that staff had been forced to use tarps held together with duct tape to create extra emergency assessment spaces.
Duct tape and tarps being used in place of a proper healthcare center. This isn't right. Now, officials with Alberta Health Services have said that more permanent partitions are being brought in and set up in the weeks ahead. But that's not a long-term solution, not even close. So today, we're here to demand the following: that Adriana LaGrange come forward and apologize on behalf of her government for failing her own constituents so badly while she is serving as the health minister.
3 people have been charged after a toddler in Edmonton ingested street drugs and died in September. Edmonton police say a friend of the boy's mother was taking care of him and took him for a walk when she noticed he was in medical distress. Police say the mother and friend took the 23-month-old to a clinic where a staff member called 911, with the boy being pronounced dead in hospital. Police say the 20-year-old friend was charged with criminal negligence in early December, while the mother and her common-law partner, who is not the biological father, turned themselves in 2 weeks later and are both facing the same charge. Calgary pastor Arthur Pawlowski and his brother David have launched legal action and are suing several parties, including the Alberta government and Alberta Health Services. The statement of claim seeks damages in excess of $1.5 million. According to the Pawlowski's lawyer, Chad Williamson, the case revolves around what they call malicious prosecution, false imprisonment, harassment, and infringed Charter of Rights that were allegedly violated during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. Well, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says Albertans need to feel safe and protected in their own communities. She says what creates a challenging environment for law enforcement are the courts. Smith also says the tent encampments in many of our cities are becoming a real issue.
If law enforcement is going out trying to do their best to keep people safe, and then it's a revolving door through the court system, people coming back out again, then it reduces not only their motivation to address the problems, but it also it doesn't address the foundational problems that we're having, that we need to get people. If they're bad guys, let's get them in jail. Mm-hmm. If they're vulnerable and need support, let's get them into addiction or mental health treatment. We're at a point now where we can't just slowly watch people kill themselves. And we have to understand that a lot of what we're seeing in the encampments is organized gangs, organized crime, taking advantage of vulnerable people.
And speaking of encampments, police in Edmonton say they found a large number of weapons in a homeless tent encampment. They posted on social media that they discovered the discovery was made as the Dawson Park encampment was being taken down. Police say some of the weapons confiscated include 10 samurai swords, 11 machetes, 2 axes, brass knuckles, and 2 imitation firearms. Wow. Our province's Minister of Arts, Culture, and Status of Women is headed to Los Angeles. Tanya Furr was on her way to LA to promote Alberta as a top location for film and television creators. While in Southern California, Minister Furr will be meeting with executives from HBO and other production groups to show them how Alberta is ready to make more award-winning productions like the Disney feature Prey and the HBO series The Last of Us. Together, they are nominated for 30 Emmy Emmy Awards. Officials say in addition to those meetings, Minister Furr will co-host an event showcasing Alberta's film and TV industry to Hollywood producers and studio executives. Well, after the break, a stop order is revoked after a Christian charity wins its appeal. Plus, January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So, are you aware that it could be happening in your own neighborhood? That's next. Welcome back. Well, a Lethbridge Christian charity is allowed to continue their operations after winning an appeal. Since November, a stop order was hanging over the operations of Streets Alive mission, implemented by the city of Lethbridge following a complaint by the downtown BRZ. The complaint accused Streets Alive of carrying out some of their services without proper permits. The city investigated and put a stop order in place until Streets Alive applied for at least 3 separate land use permits. But on January 5th, the Development and Appeal Board decided to revoke that stop order. The board says it came to its decision after reviewing an appeal made by Streets Alive, along with presentations at a December 21st hearing. After reviewing and weighing the evidence, the board found Streets Alive's current operation does in fact have the proper permits and allowed their appeal to stand while revoking the stop order. The co-founder of Streets Alive, Ken Kissick, says he's happy with that result.
We believe that the development department had simply erred in their interpretation of the land use definition of religious assembly, which includes worship activities and philanthropic and social activities. Worship activities go beyond singing and preaching, right? Worship activities include service and everything else. So, and in the end, the appeal board agreed that that the activities that we did, and they were well within the philanthropic and social activities, and they saw no reason for any new permits to be required. So basically, we were vindicated in our position, and it brings a lot of relief to us because the decision can't be challenged.
The topic of human trafficking has been brought to light since the release of the movie Sound of Freedom, which has touched a lot of hearts. It turns out human trafficking is not just an issue, however, in Central America, but right here in North America, including Alberta. In honor of Human Trafficking Awareness Month, BCN's Hal Roberts had Joy Lynn Stickle, founder of Not For Sale, join him to discuss the issue.
Joy Lynn, you say human trafficking is an issue here in Canada as well. Do you have some stats for us?
A lot of the stats that we do get are a bit skewed because it's such an underground issue. And so what we can say is that more than 75% of Canadians working in the Canadian sex trade were exploited as a child, which is horrible. 25% of human trafficking victims in Canada are under the age of 18. And even though the Indigenous population makes up about 4% of our population, they make up about 50% of trafficking victims.
Wow. Now let's circle back to children for just a second. Is it kids under a certain age who are being trafficked?
No, predators will look for anyone who is vulnerable, really. And obviously, younger children do tend to be more vulnerable. And we do know that about 95% of the victims, actually 95% of the perpetrators, are well known by the victims. So it's not some guy driving up in a white van offering candy to little kids. It's what people who are well known, who are trusted by the family, and that makes up 95%, which is a really scary statistic.
As a parent, what are some of the warning signs to watch out for if I see my child as a victim of human trafficking?
Obviously, parents are always watching for changes in their kids and for attitudes that come out. But a lot of things that you can see are them being more secretive, being online and being more secretive, shutting down the screen if mom and dad come into the room. And some of the things are if they come home with new gadgets, cell phones, new clothes, if they make friends that that they're keeping from you.
So, Joylyn, outside of contacting police, who else should parents or victims of human trafficking reach out to?
So you can connect to us and we can kind of help direct you. It's kind of more of a soft landing rather than straight to authorities. But we have good communication with the organizations there that we can connect people to the right people. And you could go to notforsale.ca and check in with us too.
Thanks so much for your time today, Joylyn. That was Joylyn Stickle, director of the advocacy group Not For Sale here in Lethbridge.
Still to come, the Conservative Party of Canada is showing a significant lead in the polls, and an MP laments on the Prime Minister's future.
There are those who, believe that he's perhaps going to be shown the door by those, who are inside his party that might have some sway. There are others who think he himself might come to that decision.
Welcome back. Well, the Conservative Party of Canada is showing a significant lead in the polls. Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas is in that party. She joined BCN's Hal Roberts recently to discuss how a whistleblower revealed $150 million was funneled into what the Tories are calling a Liberal slush fund. She also shares her thoughts on the future of the Prime Minister's leadership. Take a look.
Unfortunately, we're looking at a government that would rather reward its friends and make sure that they're looked after rather than serving Canadians. So it's come to our attention, based on a brave whistleblower, that about $150 million was, taken and given to insiders rather than used for actual, projects. That's a problem. And so, we've had a lot come to light since this has been investigated at Ethics Committee in the House of Commons. This has been something that as Conservatives, we've been fighting for quite some time now, and just trying to draw attention to. And so I'm really proud of my colleagues at the Ethics Committee. In particular, Michael Barrett has been the lead on this. And I just think they've done a phenomenal job shedding light on the scandal, shedding light on the misuse of funds by this government and handing it out to friends. I should also mention this isn't the first time. The government also created the app for coming into Canada and spent $54 million on it. And it's come to light now that a whole bunch of that money was actually just, again, funneled to friends rather than used for the creation of the Arrive Can app. And they are currently under investigation by the RCMP. And so we'll wait and see what comes of that. But what we do know is that there are numerous examples of corruption within this government, and Conservatives are certainly kept busy trying to stay on top of it all.
Let's talk about the Speaker of the House for just a moment here. There's been pressure by your party to force the Speaker of the House, Greg Fergus, to resign. Rachel, why is that?
Well, Mr. Fergus is a relatively new speaker. He's been there for several months now, but no doubt he knows the rules because, of course, the first act of business when you're, made the Speaker of the House and it's an elected position, it's one of trust. The first act is to become familiar with the standing orders and to be able to reinforce those. And so one of those standing orders requires him to remain non-partial, or impartial, sorry, I should say, non-partisan. And yet he dressed in his robes as the Speaker of the House and then delivered a video greeting that was then shown at the Ontario Liberal Convention. And so, of course, this came to light. And as Conservatives, we've been pushing for his resignation because at the end of the day, he's proven that he isn't able to act in an impartial manner. He's proven that he does put partisanship ahead of his role as Speaker, and we find that problematic.
Rachel, your party, the Conservative Party of Canada, is well ahead in the polls. In fact, if an election was held today, the Tories would win an easy majority government. Now, you tried to bring down the government with 30 hours of non-confidence votes to no avail. What will it take to end the Liberal NDP coalition?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the most sincere and best answer I can give is it's going to take the Canadian public to speak up and to, be bold in their vote. And so the next time we have, an election, my hope would be that Canadians are tired of the corruption of this current government, that they're tired of the misspending, that they're tired of watching, their cost of living skyrocket and go through the roof, that they're tired of crime escalating to a point where, it's our country seems unrecognizable in some places. And so, my hope, I guess, is that Canadians would see these things, and not only see them, but that they would have the boldness or the courage to vote against the current government and to choose something new, so that their future might look a whole lot better.
There's some insiders who say that Justin Trudeau may actually be forced to resign and take that long walk in the snow here to give his party a chance of being re-elected. Something similar to what his father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, did 40 years ago. But other people say, no, Trudeau's going to stay on as leader, and he's pretty happy to do so. What are you hearing right now on the Hill? Will Trudeau stay on as leader of the Federal Liberal Party of Canada?
Yeah, there's certainly a great deal of speculation around this. Of course, there are those who, believe that he's perhaps going to be shown the door by those, who are inside his party that might have some sway. There are others who think he himself might come to that decision. And then, of course, there's, another group of folks who believe he is absolutely going to stay in that position and try to win another election. So every thought is on the table, and the only way we'll know for sure, of course, is when the election is actually called, and we'll see who's in charge of the Liberal Party of Canada.
What are your hopes and fears for this new year? After the break, some of the issues are broken down in a panel discussion with leaders on the frontier. Welcome back. As we just recently turned the page on the calendar, we said goodbye to the year that was while looking ahead to the year that could be. What are your hopes for 2024? Or is there more of a fear for this new year? David Leese of Leaders on the Frontier held a panel discussion this week with Leighton Gray and Peter Hawley of Frontier Centre for Public Policy to discuss their hopes and fears for the new year. Here's an excerpt from that discussion.
I think in 2020, we were exposed to a government-declared health crisis. In 2022, we had a government-declared climate crisis. And I think what's coming in 2024 is we're going to have a government-declared financial crisis, not just declared, but engineered. The federal Liberals, they won the last two elections in 2019 and 2021 based upon fear. That has been a very successful strategy for them. It was successful for the Democrats in 2020. And I think we're going to get this again. We're going to get told that there's a financial crisis. A lot of people are already in a financial crisis. The Liberals are going to run on an election where they're going to solve all the problems. And as we know, this is small L liberal politics 101. You create an imaginary crisis. You do whatever you can to cause it to happen. And then you promise people that you're going to come in and solve it. So that's something that I'm watching for in 2024.
Okay. So Leighton, you've raised the flag on the theme of fear and how that's used often not as good public policy, but as a way to manipulate decision-making. Wow. What do you think, Peter? Are you fearful of the oncoming climate crisis?
Well, we've been the think tank that's been the most skeptical for the longest time, and I don't think anything has changed. We've seen weather like this before. We're watching all the rioting and protests across Europe. The German farmers are, of course, upset. Again, we have, these, I call it the climate blob, raising taxes, raising the price of energy, raising the price of food. And I think people have had it. We're watching the election of, people so-called far right, whatever that means, in Holland. The biggest party now in Germany is the AfD, which is essentially a conservative party. And they're the biggest party. And so, no, I think the folk on the street they've had enough. And we'll see. And I agree with you, Leighton, that of course the manipulations and so on, they're going to continue. But I think people are getting tired of it.
I think that's true, Peter. And just another note, I know that you very much like EVs, and I think it's great if people like EVs that they should buy them. I like my gas guzzler. because I'm an Albertan. Just kidding. But I noticed that there was a story today that Hertz Rental Car, one of the largest rental car companies in the world, they're going to sell 20,000 EVs and they're going to shift back to gas-powered cars. And of course, I think this is a way of the market, people in the market who buy a lot of cars, sort of regurgitating back at the Democrats in the U.S. and liberals in Canada, regurgitating back, saying, "Listen, we're not going to, we're not going to stop making or using gas-powered cars by 2035."
So as you look to 2024, I do want to ask each of you briefly, where do you see the largest hope that's emerging here? Where do you see hope for 2024?
I think we are at peak woke, and people are now aware that we have a huge problem throughout the system, particularly universities and so on. Our issue really is, do the governments have the policy capacity to make the necessary changes? I think that's our issue. Okay, and we all know very good politicians, but they're getting their advice sometimes from their buddy who ran a rental car company or whatever. Okay, no, you need heavyweight policy advisors, and of course, running a think tank, you should be talking to think tanks and so on, because they have the answers.
Okay, thank you, Peter. What about you, Leighton?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm going to be watching most closely is public safety and security. The disintegration of our institutions is also happening at things like policing. And then at the same time, we have somebody in some poor guy in Toronto, in Peterborough actually, had somebody come in to rob his store, and with a rubber bat, and he was able to get the bat away from him and subdue the attacker. And they're charging the store owner.
A polar vortex has moved its way across the prairies. After the break, we tell you who's doing what to help those most vulnerable to the cold. Welcome back. With the polar vortex that moved through Alberta these past few days, temperatures dropped to close to minus 50 degrees with the wind chill, meaning frostbite can occur within minutes. Naturally, our thoughts turn to those who don't have a comfortable, warm place to go, including many of our most vulnerable. Ken Kissick is with Streets Alive Mission in Lethbridge. He says frostbite is one of the biggest concerns for their clients, but adds there is a lot of adequate indoor space where the displaced can go for safety.
This year, we believe there is adequate indoor space in the shelter to manage the population or pretty close to it. But there's always a group that wants to stay out, and that's a concern for us. It's also a concern to be able to continue to provide them with warm gloves, warm headwear, warm footwear, which we're in short supply of, so we could use some of that. And we're open for the warming center to allow them to come in and grab a coffee and everything else, as are some other places, the library, there's soup kitchen, there's certain places that open up when it gets this cold. And a lot of businesses, even though they struggle, they'll let people stand in the doorways longer and everything else. But it has potential to be severe for that population.
Kissick says the Streets Alive outreach team has been working with the city this past week to check on the well-being of many of our homeless. And as Kissick was mentioning there, the city of Lethbridge activated its extreme weather response protocols to help provide shelter from the cold. A number of facilities have been staying open later to help the city's vulnerable. That includes the main and crossings branches of the Lethbridge Public Library, the Regional Park and Ride Transit Terminal, and Helen Schuler Nature Center. Daytime community supports are also available at the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, the city's 2 food banks, and of course, Streets Alive. The Arctic air will continue in the region into part of the weekend. Daytime highs across much of the province are only expected to hover around that minus 30 degree mark. Only minus 30 degrees. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. And with the cold weather and all the snow we've been receiving across southwestern Alberta, it's made for a fairly busy time for the folks with the Alberta Motor Association. AMA says when it comes to our city, call volumes were through the roof and the average wait time was over 2 hours.
anything to do with your vehicle that makes it inoperable. I mean, we do a lot of tire changing this time of year, especially when it starts to get icy on the roads, people sliding into curbs and such. We do see a lot of the unlocks, people starting their cars, of course, to keep them warm, and then locking their keys in their car becomes pretty popular this time of year as well. So we see that volume starts to pop up a little bit. And then, of course, the regular towing of vehicles breaking down at the side of the road or getting into car accidents.
And it is the time of year when we see a lot more vehicle thefts as well. People start their vehicles and leave them unlocked and leave them running to warm up. Well, Lethbridge Police Service, in conjunction with the Calgary Police, have launched a new campaign this week called Operation Cold Start. It's a simple reminder to lock your vehicle when it's running. Sergeant Leanne Christos from the LPS explains how the campaign works.
In the early morning hours between 6 and 9 a.m., police go out as teams and we drive around the neighborhoods. And when we find a running vehicle, we hop out and we see if it's unlocked. If it's unlocked, we close the door and we put one of these pamphlets on the windshield. And basically, the pamphlet just tells you about Operation Cold Start, about what the police are doing, going around and checking these vehicles.
Sergeant Christos says the best way to protect yourself from becoming a victim of vehicle theft is to simply keep it locked at all times. Makes sense. Well, the final numbers are in for donations received at a popular Christmas light display. The Attridge display collected donations of food and money in support of the Interfaith Food Bank and Angel Tree. Host of the display, Gregory Attridge, says the support received from the community was overwhelming.
I'm just astounded by the amount of support that the city has shown us, and they were dropping food off every single day. We raised nearly 400 pounds of food for the Interfaith Food Bank, and we had 3 trunkfuls of toys for Angel Tree. It'll help them out for months to come.
The City of Lethbridge announced the official launch of its City Project web map on Tuesday, a dynamic online platform that provides residents with accurate and up-to-date information on road and facility closures, along with city projects and initiatives. The new self-service option may help mitigate some of the call volumes that they receive to 311. When we return, plans to twin Highway 3 in southern Alberta have been talked about for almost 50 years, and now it looks like the ball will finally get rolling. That discussion after the break.